Man, they say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was starting to get that. The crowd's cheers felt empty, like they were bouncing off my chest without sinking in. I stood off stage at the Meridian Playhouse in Seattle, watching my wife Abigail take her final bow. Her emerald dress caught the spotlight like a forest catching fire. The audience ate it up. They always did. "She killed it tonight," murmured Elliot, the stage manager, from behind me. He wasn't talking to me, though. His words were for Abigail, who glided off stage, her face lit with that after-show high I fell for back when we first met, 13 years ago. "Jacob!" Abigail grabbed my arms, her eyes sparking with adrenaline. "Did you feel the crowd during that love scene? It was like a lightning storm." I managed a grin, though it felt stiff. "You were incredible, babe," I said. She planted a quick kiss on my cheek, leaving a smudge of stage makeup, then turned to Elliot. "And you? That closing speech?" "I got goosebumps." Elliot flashed a polished smile. "It's all about the spark, sweetheart. Pure magic." The after-party at a swanky lounge in Capitol Hill was packed with the usual theater types: agents, reviewers, money folks. I leaned against the bar sipping a bourbon, while Abigail worked the room like a pro. She'd swapped her stage dress for a sleek navy number that turned heads everywhere. "Your wife's a phenom," said Gloria Vance, a producer with jet black hair tied back tight and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "That performance? Electric. She's got something special." I nodded. "Yeah, she's got a gift, all right." Gloria tilted her head. "And you, Jacob? Got any new cooking projects?" I'd been directing small shows for 16 years, mostly offbeat productions in community theaters that got good reviews but barely paid the bills. Abigail was the big earner now, her name headlining posters while mine was tucked in tiny font on playbills. "Taking a breather," I said. "Gotta focus on Abigail's career right now." Gloria's smile had an edge. "That's real progressive of you." Across the room, Abigail laughed at something Elliot said, her hand resting on his arm a little too long. I'd been noticing these moments piling up over the last month of rehearsals, her brushing his shoulder during script reads, their hushed chats during breaks. I mumbled an excuse and slipped toward the restroom, craving a breather. The hallway was dim, lined with old wood paneling and faded photos of local theater icons. As I neared the men's room, voices drifted from the women's restroom nearby. "You were unreal tonight," one said. Sounded like Mia, a supporting actress. "The heat between you and Elliot? Off the charts." Another voice chimed in, then Abigail's cut through. "It's easy when you're feeding off real fire, not just—" She trailed off. I leaned closer to the wall, my pulse picking up. "Jacob's great, but he's steady, predictable. Elliot's got this intensity." My gut twisted. "You serious about him?" Mia asked. "I'm not sure yet," Abigail said, "but I need to figure out what I'm chasing. Jacob and we've been together so long, I forgot what it's like to feel alive." Footsteps clicked, and the door swung shut. I stood there staring at my reflection in the chipped bathroom mirror, her words echoing, steady, predictable. Back at the party, Abigail was chatting up a local arts blogger, her smile picture perfect. Elliot caught my eye from across the room and raised his drink, smirking like he knew something I didn't. The cab ride back to our place in Fremont was quiet. Abigail stared out at the city's neon blur, her fingers tapping her knee. "Reviews were solid tonight," I tried. "The Post critic was raving." She glanced at me, her face distant. "Yeah, they liked it." Then she sighed. "Jacob, we need to talk." My stomach sank. "About what?" "I think I need some room," she said, "to focus on me, my career." This show opened doors I didn't expect. The cab pulled up to our Craftsman house. I sat frozen as she paid the driver. "Room?" I echoed as we climbed the porch steps. "Not forever," she said. "Just time to sort things out." Inside, surrounded by 13 years of memories, our old couch, her playbills framed on the wall, she started packing a bag. I leaned against the bedroom doorframe, watching her fold that navy dress. "Is there someone else?" I asked, my voice low. She froze. "It's not about that, Jacob. It's about me." But her phone lit up on the nightstand, and I caught Elliot's name before she snatched it. "I'll crash at Jenna's for a bit," she said, avoiding my eyes. 2 hours later, I was alone in the living room, scrolling my phone like a zombie. A notification pinged. Abigail was live on Instagram. The video showed her at some rooftop bar in Belltown, laughing with Elliot and the cast. Then Elliot leaned in and kissed her. Not a stage kiss, a real one. The comments lit up with hearts and "OMG, you too." I set the phone down, staring at my empty bourbon glass. Steady, predictable. Maybe it was time to shake things up. The house felt like a ghost of our life together. Abigail's coffee cup sat in the sink, smudged with her lipstick. Her theater books lined the shelves, dog-eared pages like little white flags. I called in sick to the freelance gig I'd been doing to cover bills between directing jobs. Then I started dismantling everything. Social media? Gone. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wiped. I ditched our old phone plan, closed our shared accounts, and moved my share to a new one under my middle name, Michael. Credit cards? Shredded, along with our old wedding pics. Abigail texted a couple times, "You okay? And let's talk soon." I didn't reply. A realtor named Denise, all business in a crisp blazer, loved our house's hardwood floors and brick fireplace. "This'll sell fast in this market," she said. I sold it all. Furniture, appliances, even Abigail's fancy coffee maker. My wedding ring went to a pawn shop in Tacoma for $900 cash. In 2 weeks, I erased every trace of Jacob Pierce from Seattle. No forwarding address, no digital footprint. I found a cabin on Craigslist near Lake Tahoe, a few hours from the city. The owner, a retired guy named Walt, needed someone to look after it while he spent winter with his son in Arizona. "It's remote," he said, tossing me the keys. "Nearest neighbor's a mile off. Gets real quiet." Quiet sounded like exactly what I needed. The cabin I'd rented near Lake Tahoe was cozy but stuck in time. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with avocado green appliances straight out of the 70s, and a living room with a big stone fireplace that seemed to anchor the place. A rickety desk by the window gave me a view of the lake, its edges already icing over. I set up my laptop and started typing. Meanwhile, Abigail and Elliot's fling was all over the theater blogs. They were posing on red carpets, their pictures plastered across Seattle Stage and Drama Digest. The media loved the angle. 2 fiery actors falling in love, both on stage and off. I couldn't stop myself from tracking it, saving screenshots, building folders. Abigail did interviews about rediscovering herself and chasing new horizons. Elliot posted Instagram stories showing off their matching tattoos, tiny comedy tragedy masks on their wrists. Nights were when I wrote. Words spilled out like they never had before. Raw, sharp, real. I called the script Shades of Us and told myself it was just a story, even though every line came from the wreckage of my marriage. The main character, Daniel, was a director whose wife leaves him for her co-star. But unlike me, Daniel doesn't just vanish. He plans, he maneuvers, he makes them feel the weight of their choices. I wrote under the pen name J.M. Harrow, using my initials and Abigail's mom's maiden name. The irony felt like a quiet jab. By mid-January, I had a first draft, 95 pages of dialogue that sliced like a razor. The monologues peeled back the lies behind artistic egos, and the final act was a gut punch I knew would leave audiences stunned. The script wasn't just good, it was the best thing I'd ever written, forged in hurt and honed by anger. On February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Gloria Vance, the producer I'd met at the after-party. I'd kept an eye on her work. She was known for betting on bold, risky projects. "Dear Ms. Vance," I wrote, "I've got a script that'll shake audiences and spark conversation. Shades of Us dives into the wreckage of passion and the cost of chasing art. I think it'll stick with you." I attached the file and hit send before I could overthink it. Then I poured a bourbon and watched the sun dip below the frozen lake, waiting for the wheels to start turning. Gloria's reply came 3 days later. "Mr. Harrow, this script is dynamite," she wrote. On the phone, her voice buzzed with energy. "I've been in this game 20 years and nothing's hit me like this. The dialogue crackles. It's alive." I asked, "Think it's stageable?" She didn't miss a beat. "With the right cast and director, this could be the talk of the season. I'm thinking an off-Broadway run first, maybe at the Civic Theater in Portland. Build hype, then maybe go bigger." My pulse kicked up. "Got a director in mind?" "Marcus Reed," she said. "He's been hunting for something with teeth after that flop with City Shadows." I knew Marcus from way back. We'd collaborated on a show that tanked when he had a meltdown during rehearsals. He was brilliant but shaky, prone to overthinking himself into a corner. Perfect for this. "Heard he's got vision," I said. "What about casting?" Gloria leaned in, her voice conspiratorial. "The female lead, Lena. She needs someone with classical chops but real vulnerability. Someone who can carry that brutal final speech." My grip tightened on the phone. "Any ideas?" "Abigail Pierce," she said. "She just wrapped that killer run at the Meridian. She's got the range and the name to draw crowds. The role feels like it was written for her. I bit back a smile at the irony. And the male lead? I asked. Elliot Kane, she said. He's perfect opposite her. Their real-life chemistry would sell tickets in a heartbeat. I kept my tone even. Sounds like a smart pick. Gloria paused. One thing, though, the script's anonymous. My lawyers need a face-to-face before we proceed. We set a meeting at a coffee shop in Fremont. I took a bus from Tahoe, wearing a ball cap and shades, feeling like some low-budget secret agent. Gloria was sharper than I remembered, her dark hair now cut to her chin. She squinted at me as I sat down at her table. You seem familiar, she said. Just got one of those faces, I replied with a shrug. She slid a contract over. A standard option deal, 6 months to get the show up, with wiggle room if needed. I signed as J.M. Harrow, my handwriting deliberately loopy, nothing like my usual scrawl. That ending, she said, tapping the table. It's a lot. Non-negotiable, I cut in. The whole play builds to that moment. No payoff, no point. She nodded slowly. It's bold, I'll give you that. Hope we find a theater with the guts to run it. Over the next week, I followed the production's progress on theater sites and social media. Gloria optioned Shades of Us for a summer run. Marcus Reed signed on, calling it a razor-sharp look at love's underbelly. Then the casting news dropped. Abigail was offered the role of Lena first. According to Stage West, she hesitated. The part was heavy, but couldn't pass up working with Marcus. Getting Elliot on board took a little nudge. I set up a burner email and sent Marcus a few anonymous casting tips, planting the seed for Elliot's name. I couldn't help but grin when I saw the theater blogs light up. Have you considered Elliot Kane for Nathan? I'd written from a burner email, posing as a drama critic. His recent roles show real grit. Within days, Elliot was locked in for the part. The casting news hit like a wildfire. Real-life couple Abigail Pierce and Elliot Kane to headline daring new drama. One Seattle stage headline blared. From my cabin by Lake Tahoe, I read every article, smirking at how critics were already buzzing about the parallels between their romance and the characters they'd play. If only they knew the half of it. Rehearsals kicked off in March at a rented studio in Ballard. I couldn't resist driving up to scope it out, parking across the street with a clear view of the second-floor windows. Abigail looked different, gaunter than in her promo shots, her cheekbones cutting sharp angles under the harsh lights. She wore leggings and a baggy hoodie, her hair tossed up in a messy knot. Elliot, sporting a scruffy beard for the role, or maybe because Abigail liked it, lounged nearby. Marcus Reed, the director, prowled the room like a restless wolf, his hair a wild mess. Even from a distance, I could see his tension in the way he waved his arms, barking notes. I'd been nudging Marcus indirectly, using fake accounts, drama students, wannabe critics, random fans, to drop suggestions for the production. Most got ignored, but a few stuck. Lena's arc needs more rawness in Act 2, I'd emailed from a spoofed University of Washington theater account. Maybe hint at her past wounds through subtle cues, not straight-up dialogue. Marcus took the bait, adding improv drills that pushed Abigail to crack open Lena's emotional scars. Another email from a blogger suggested, have Nathan's final speech hit the audience head-on, break the fourth wall, let them feel his anger. That one made it into rehearsals, too. I'd sit for hours watching through those windows, studying how Abigail and Elliot moved together. Their chemistry was electric, but I could see fractures. Elliot glued to his phone during breaks, Abigail bristling at Marcus's chaotic directing. The tabloids were eating it up. Trouble in Paradise? Abigail Pierce and Elliot Kane's romance strains under rehearsal pressure, one headline screamed. A vicious article in the Seattle Post quoted an insider. Abigail's unraveling in rehearsals. Elliot's more focused on his social media than his lines. I leaned back in my chair, savoring it. Planting those anonymous tips was easier than you'd think, just a few well-timed whispers to bloggers. 2 weeks into rehearsals, I made my first bold move. During a lunch break, I slipped into the building through a back door and climbed to the second floor. The rehearsal space was empty except for a young woman sorting props. Lila, her name tag read, assistant stage manager. Hey, I said, stepping up. Is Marcus Reed around? She turned and I eased back into the hallway shadows. He's out for lunch, she said. Can I help you? I'm J.M. Harrow, I said, keeping my voice low. The writer. Her eyes went wide. No way. Everyone's dying to know who you are. Marcus has a million questions about the script. I nodded. I like staying out of the spotlight, but tell Marcus he can email me if he needs clarity on any scenes, especially the ending. I want that final moment to hit hard, feel real. She squinted into the dark. Wait, have I seen you somewhere? But I was already halfway down the stairs, my boots echoing in the quiet. That night, I fired off a detailed email to Marcus about the last scene. The effect has to be razor sharp, I wrote. Use a real prop weapon with blanks, handled by someone trained for stage combat. The audience needs to believe, just for a second, that it's actually happening. Marcus replied within hours. Your vision's intense. We'll make it work. I leaned back in my cabin chair, moonlight glinting off the icy lake. Everything was lining up. Abigail was about to pour her heart into a role carved from our broken vows. Elliot would speak my words about betrayal and reckoning, and I'd be there, a ghost in the crowd, watching it all unfold. Shades of Us was living up to its name. By April, the Seattle theater scene was buzzing with gossip. Golden couple cracking? One Post article crowed, with a blurry photo of Elliot leaving a bar in Pioneer Square with someone who sure wasn't Abigail. I read every line from my cabin, sipping coffee like it was vintage whiskey. That anonymous source? Me, naturally, feeding dirt through a freelance photographer I'd paid on the sly. The story painted Elliot as a party hound, skipping rehearsals, cozying up to extras. Abigail was spiraling, second-guessing every line, every move. She's a nightmare to work with, I'd muttered to a local arts reporter outside a cafe, using a fake drawl. Marcus is this close to recasting her. That quote landed in print, and the fallout was glorious. Abigail's agent called an urgent meeting with Gloria Vance. The next day, I watched from my spot across the street as Abigail stormed into the studio, eyes red, Elliot trailing her like a kicked dog. My phone pinged with another email to Marcus, this one from a concerned drama professor at Seattle University. I'm following your production closely, I wrote. Please keep Lena's final monologue as written, no cuts. The playwright's original intent is critical to the play's punch. Marcus had mentioned in a blog interview that Abigail was struggling with a brutal speech in the last act, where Lena lays bare her darkest regrets about her marriage. Abigail wanted to tone it down, make Lena softer. Not a chance. I crafted that email with precision, knowing it'd keep her wrestling with every raw word. Lena's raw honesty in that final speech is what makes her heartbreaking, not just pitiful. If the actress can't handle the emotional gut punch, maybe she's not cut out for it. I sent that email to Marcus, knowing it had hit hard. The next day, Stage West reported Marcus was standing firm on keeping Shades of Us untouched. The writer's vision is non-negotiable, he was quoted saying. This play is meant to unsettle. My real masterpiece, though, was still waiting in the wings, a line I'd buried in Lena's big monologue, pulled straight from an interview Abigail gave to Pacific Arts magazine last year. She'd talked about safe love versus real fire, saying, sometimes you gotta pick between comfort and a spark. I spent too long settling for someone who loved me more than I loved him. Art takes guts. The interviewer ate it up, splashing the quote in bold. Now those words were Lena's, weaponized to cut deep. I sent Marcus one last script tweak, calling it the definitive draft of Lena's monologue, with Abigail's exact words woven in. His reply was quick. This change is brutal. Abigail's gonna struggle with it, but that's why it's genius. Exactly what I wanted. By the time opening night rolled around in June, the Seattle theater scene was electric with hype. Shades of Us was stirring up more buzz than any show in years. Critics were already calling it either a game changer or a train wreck. Elliot had been spotted around town with 3 different women in the past month. None of them Abigail. Their relationship was officially messy, per their publicists. Abigail stopped doing interviews, claiming she needed to focus on the role, but grainy photos showed her outside the studio, looking gaunt, chain-smoking. I didn't feel a shred of pity. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. The final piece clicked 2 days before the curtain went up. I mailed Marcus a package with a vintage prop revolver I'd bought from a theater supply shop, along with precise instructions for its use in the climax. This gun will make the ending feel real, my note read. Follow the directions exactly, and the audience will never forget it. Marcus emailed back, you're a mastermind. This show's gonna be legendary. He had no clue how right he was. Opening night at the Cascade Theater was a madhouse. Critics, investors, and theater bigwigs packed the lobby, champagne flutes clinking like wind chimes. I hung back in a corner, wearing a beat-up ball cap and fake glasses, my beard grown out to mask my face. Nobody pegged me as the guy once married to the star. Gloria Vance, dazzling in a gold dress, was near the bar, dodging questions about her mystery playwright. J.M. Harrow guards his privacy, she told a Post reporter, but his script says it all. Outside, through the theater's glass doors, cameras flashed as local celebs rolled up. This was Abigail's kind of night. The spotlight, the buzz, the adoration. She was about to get more than she ever bargained for. The first act played out like I'd scripted it in my head. Elliot's Nathan was all charm, but shallow, a guy mistaking swagger for substance. Abigail's Lena was raw, starving for something real, her vulnerability almost too much to watch. At intermission, I caught snippets of chatter. The writing's savage. Abigail Pierce is giving everything. This Harrow guy's got some serious baggage. I smirked and grabbed another bourbon. Act 2 got darker. Lena's affair started hot but turned selfish, while Nathan's betrayal hit harder than he expected, his pain raw and real. The final scene, though, was my crowning touch. The lights dimmed as Elliot stepped in from stage left, holding the prop revolver I'd sent. Abigail stood center stage, lit by a single beam, delivering Lena's monologue. "Sometimes you gotta choose between comfort and a spark," she said, her voice cracking. "I spent too long settling for someone who loved me more than I loved him. Art takes guts." A ripple ran through the crowd. Critics scribbled furiously, recognizing the line from Abigail's own interview. Elliot raised the gun, his face twisted with hurt and fury. "You want a spark?" he growled. "Here's something to feel." The shot rang out, sharp as a thunderclap. Abigail's eyes went wide and she staggered back, hand clutching her chest. The audience gasped, then clapped, thinking it was killer staging. But Abigail didn't bow. She dropped to her knees, then crumpled to the stage. Elliot stood there, frozen, the gun still in his hand, smoke curling from the barrel. "Abigail," he muttered, voice shaking, not projecting. This wasn't in the script. Blood started pooling under her. A woman in the front row screamed. Then all hell broke loose, people shouting, scrambling for exits or rushing the stage. I stayed still in my corner, watching my work come to life. Abigail would never betray another vow, never choose spark over loyalty again. Shades of Us was complete. The Cascade Theater turned into a crime scene in minutes. Paramedics stormed the stage while cops funneled the frantic crowd into the lobby. I pressed against the back wall, blending into the chaos. Elliot sat on a prop chair, staring at his hands, his face ghost white, muttering, "It was supposed to be blanks. The gun was supposed to have blanks." Detective Carl Hawkins showed up 20 minutes later, his wrinkled jacket and heavy eyes screaming he'd been dragged from another case. I stood back, watching Detective Carl Hawkins scribble in his notebook, taking in the chaos at the Cascade Theater. "Time of death?" he asked the coroner. "Around 10:52 p.m., she replied. "Single gunshot to the chest, point blank. She was gone in minutes." Elliot finally looked up from his hands, his face pale as ash. "This can't be happening," he stammered. "We ran that scene 100 times. The gun only had blanks." Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "Who had access to it?" Elliot's voice cracked. "The props guy, the stage manager, me?" He shook his head. "God, Abigail's dead. This isn't real." Watching him fall apart, I felt nothing. No thrill, no guilt, just a strange calm, like I'd finished a puzzle that had been nagging me for months. Gloria Vance stood near the stage, her gold dress creased, mascara streaking her face. "We have to shut this down," she kept saying to anyone nearby. "It's a tragedy." Hawkins cut in, his voice flat. "It's a murder investigation. Nobody leaves until we've talked." They started questioning people in the theater's break room. I lingered in the hallway, catching bits of Elliot's statement. "I grabbed the gun from the props table 5 minutes before the scene," he said. "Same as always. Aim, fire, Abigail falls, curtain drops. Except tonight, she didn't get up." Hawkins pressed. "Who else touched it today?" Elliot hesitated. "Maybe Lila, the stage manager, or Greg, the props guy. Everyone's careful with it." When they brought in Greg Parker, the props master, things got interesting. "I loaded the blanks at 5:30 p.m. Like every night," he said. "Locked it in the props cabinet until we called places. But when I checked at 9, the cabinet was open." Hawkins leaned forward. "Open how?" "Not forced," Greg said. "Someone with a key got in." Hawkins jotted that down. "Who's got keys?" "Me, Marcus the director, Lila, and the theater's key holder." I edged closer to the door, hanging on every word. Then Greg dropped a bomb. "There was a note inside the cabinet," he said, handing over a scrap of paper. It said, "Use the alternate gun for tonight's show." Signed, J.M. Harrow. My pulse jumped, but I kept my face blank. I hadn't written any notes. Hawkins studied it. Ever seen the playwright's handwriting? Greg shook his head. Nah, he's been a total ghost. When Lila, the stage manager, got called in, I held my breath. She was the only one who'd gotten a decent look at me weeks ago. The writer showed up once during rehearsals, she told Hawkins. Kept to the shadows, said he was J.M. Harrow. Real cagey guy. Describe him, Hawkins said. Average height, dark hair, maybe late 40s, she said. Wore a cap, stayed out of the light. But something about him felt familiar, like I'd seen him around the theater scene before. My throat tightened. Lila was sharper than I'd figured. The investigation dragged on past midnight. By 3 a.m., the cops had bagged the gun, questioned every cast and crew member, and pieced together a timeline. It looked bad for Elliot. He was the last to handle the weapon, and his fling with an understudy had hit the gossip blogs, straining things with Abigail. Plus, he'd been knocking back drinks before the show. As the sky lightened over Seattle, Hawkins made his move. Elliot Kane, you're under arrest for the murder of Abigail Pierce, he said. Elliot's sobs bounced off the theater walls as they cuffed him and let him out. Outside, tabloid cameras went nuts, snapping his every stumble. I slipped out a side door, my work done. Abigail was gone. Elliot's career was toast, and I was still a shadow, pulling strings nobody saw. The story took over every paper in the city. Seattle star gunned down in shocking onstage murder, one headline screamed. I read it all from a greasy diner near the waterfront, sipping coffee while the morning news played on a corner TV. Elliot's mugshot flashed across every channel, his eyes puffy with shock and tears. Kane insists he's innocent, the anchor said, claiming someone swapped real bullets for the blanks. Police say there's no evidence to back this up. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Harrow, Gloria Vance here. We need to talk ASAP. Call me. I waited a couple hours before replying, playing the part of a stunned writer reeling from the news. We met at the same Fremont coffee shop where I'd signed the contract. Gloria looked wrecked, her dark hair limp, her usually flawless makeup smudged. This is a nightmare, she said, skipping any small talk. Abigail's dead, Elliot's locked up, and the press is calling our show cursed. I kept my voice even. I'm gutted, Gloria. Abigail was one of a kind. She frowned. The cops want to talk to you about the script, the gun instructions, all of it. My heart picked up, but I stayed cool. I'll help however I can, I said. She slid a document across the table. I also need you to sign over your royalties. The show's dead, but there could be lawsuits, insurance claims. My lawyers say it's cleaner if the writer steps away. I saw it coming. The contract funneled all royalties to the Abigail Pierce Fund for Young Artists. The irony was almost too good. I signed without a flinch. That afternoon, Hawkins called. Mr. Harrow, I need you to come in about your play, he said, his voice all business. We met at a precinct in Capitol Hill, a stuffy room that smelled of burnt coffee and paperwork. Hawkins was younger than he sounded, maybe 38, with sharp green eyes and a touch of gray at his temples. Detective Carl Hawkins kicked things off, flipping open a manila folder. Weird setup, he said, eyeing me. An unknown playwright pens a drama about cheating and murder. The show opens and the leading lady gets killed by her real-life boyfriend. Hell of a twist. I leaned back in the stiff chair, keeping my cool. Tragic twist, I said. Nothing more. He tapped his pen. You modeled your characters on real people, didn't you? I shrugged, playing it calm. Every story pulls from life. Lena and Nathan? They're just types. The cheating wife, the burned husband. You see that in everything from old plays to daytime TV. Hawkins scribbled something. That final monologue, critics say it's almost word for word from an interview Abigail gave last year. I forced a small smile. Guess great minds think alike. Or maybe Abigail connected with Lena because she saw herself in her. He shifted gears. Tell me about the prop gun. You sent detailed notes about using a real one for realism. I nodded. Theater's all about making it feel real. I wanted the audience to feel the weight of that moment, the fear. Who else knew about your instructions? He asked. Just Marcus Reed, the director, I said. I trusted him to handle it right. Hawkins leaned forward. Have you ever swung by the theater during rehearsals? That was the tricky one. Lila's description was fuzzy, but a flat-out lie could trip me up. Maybe once or twice, I said. Writers get curious about their work. He raised an eyebrow. Lila Carter says she talked to you backstage. Said you seem familiar. I gave a casual shrug. I've been around Seattle's theater scene for years. Faces start to blur. Hawkins slid his card across the table. Don't skip town without telling me. We're not done here. Walking out of the precinct, I felt a flicker of nerves. Hawkins was sharp, piecing things together, sensing something off but not quite nailing it. That night, back at my Lake Tahoe cabin, I built a fire in the stone fireplace. The flames flickered as I fed them pages from my old notebook, the one where I'd sketched out Abigail's downfall, every bitter detail, every spark of anger. It all turned to ash, but Hawkins' sharp eyes stuck with me. He was still hunting, working a puzzle he didn't fully get. This wasn't over. Elliot Kane's collapse became Seattle's favorite scandal. The tabloids couldn't get enough. From stage to cell block, one Post headline screamed, with a shot of Elliot in an orange jumpsuit. I followed it all from my lakeside hideout, clipping articles for a scrapbook of his ruin. His agent bailed. His sponsorships dried up. The action flick was lined up to recast him in days. The real damage, though, was personal. His family issued a statement cutting ties. Old co-stars gave interviews about their shock and disappointment. On social media, he was a villain overnight. I always got a bad vibe from him, posted Mia, an actress from Abigail's last show. Elliot was cold, like he was always playing a part, even off stage. The legal wheels turned fast. Elliot's public defender, a frazzled woman named Karen Walsh, was fighting a losing battle. The gun had only Elliot's fingerprints. He'd been seen with it right before the shot. His motive was obvious. His affair with an understudy had gone viral, threatening his relationship with Abigail, and he'd been drinking hard before the show. My client's innocent, Walsh kept saying at press conferences, but her voice sounded hollow. Elliot was crumbling in jail, losing weight, his hands twitching nervously in every photo. The preliminary hearing was at a zoo. I sat in the back of the courtroom, wearing a different jacket and thicker glasses, just another face in the crowd of reporters and gawkers. Elliot looked rough, his beard wild, his jumpsuit hanging loose. When the prosecutor read the charges, second-degree murder, his shoulders shook like he was holding back sobs. The district attorney, Diane Brooks, laid it out cold. The defendant had motive, means, and opportunity, she said. Abigail Pierce was pulling away, her career soaring while he tanked. He saw his shot in that final scene and took it. Elliot's defense was weak. Someone swapped the bullets, he mumbled. But who? Why? The prosecution tore him apart. Security footage showed him in the props room alone 20 minutes before curtain. The gun had only his prints. 3 witnesses said he was drunk and edgy before the show. Then Karen Walsh dropped a bomb that made my stomach lurch. Your Honor, she said during a sidebar I strained to hear, we have evidence the murder weapon was bought 2 days before the shooting, not by my client, by someone else. My hands tightened on the bench. I'd been careful, paid cash, wore a disguise. The judge let Walsh present her proof. Grainy security footage from a shop called Dawson's Theatrical Supply in Tacoma, timestamped 2:19 p.m., 3 days before opening night. The grainy security footage showed a guy, medium height, ball cap, sunglasses, handing over cash for a .38 revolver, the same kind that killed Abigail. His face was hidden under the cap's brim, impossible to make out. This proves someone else planned Abigail's murder, Karen Walsh argued in court. Someone set my client up to take the fall. The prosecutor pushed back. Even if another gun was bought, there's no proof it's the murder weapon. Mr. Kane could have gotten the bullets himself. The judge let the footage in as evidence, but said it didn't clear Elliot. I left the Seattle courthouse feeling uneasy. Walsh was sharper than I'd expected, spinning a story about a shadowy plot against her client. That night, an unexpected visitor showed up at my Lake Tahoe cabin. Detective Carl Hawkins stood on the porch, his jacket collar flipped up against the chilly November breeze. Nice spot you got here, Mr. Harrow, he said. Mind if I come in? I didn't have much choice, so I let him inside. He scanned the bare-bones setup, the laptop on the wooden desk, the cold fireplace full of ashes. Keeping up with the Kane case, he asked, settling into a creaky chair. Hard not to, I said. It's everywhere. He nodded. Defense thinks someone framed Kane, that the real killer's still out there. I poured us both a bourbon, my hands steady despite my pulse racing. You buy that? Hawkins took the glass, studying me. 25 years as a cop, you learn to trust your gut. And my gut says this case ain't as clean as it looks. He sipped, eyes locked on mine. Sometimes the easy answer's the right one. But that gun shop footage has me wondering. Whoever did this planned it down to the second. Bought the gun early, knew exactly how to use it. That kind of patience doesn't fit Kane. Everyone says he's a hothead, all emotion, no strategy. This took brains, timing. He stood, wandering to my desk, glancing at my laptop. You ever been married, Mr. Harrow? The question hit like a jab. Why's that matter, I asked. He turned, his green eyes sharp. Your play, Shades of Us, it's got this raw take on betrayal. Nathan's pain feels real, like it came from somewhere deep. I shrugged. Writers soak up life, detective. We turn what we see into stories. He didn't buy it. This feels more like a diary than a story. Lila Carter had called him, he said, claiming she'd finally placed me. My chest tightened, but I kept my face blank. Said you used to direct small shows around Seattle, Hawkins continued. Theater's a tight world, right? Faces stick. I nodded. I've done my share of gigs. Directed a play called Starlit Shores about 6 years back, starring Abigail Pierce. It was a low-budget show during a brief moment when Abigail and I tried to patch things up. She'd taken a pay cut to work with me, believing in the script when nobody else did. Abigail was a star, I said, choosing my words carefully. Hawkins set his glass down. Lila said you two seemed tight back then. Real tight. He leaned in. Here's my theory. You knew Abigail, maybe more than you're letting on. Watched her leave you for Elliot Kane, and it burned you up. So you wrote this play to get even, cast them as versions of themselves, then set up Abigail's murder and pinned it on Kane. The cabin was quiet except for the wind creaking the windows. I met his stare. That's a wild story, detective. You'd need proof. He gave a tight smile. Proof's what I'm after, and I'll find it. After he left, I watched his car vanish down the snowy road. Hawkins was in trouble, but he was too late. Abigail was gone. Elliot was facing life behind bars, and I was still free. Sometimes revenge works best when nobody can prove it. Then at 6 a.m., on a frosty Tuesday in December, a knock jolted me awake. I'd been up for an hour, watching the sunrise turn the frozen lake gold and purple. Lila Carter stood on my porch, clutching a manila envelope, shivering in the cold. Her breath puffed in the air as she spoke. Mr. Harrow, we need to talk. I let her in, noting the bags under her eyes and her jittery vibe. She'd driven hours from Seattle to face me. Coffee? I offered. She ignored it. I know who you are, she said, her voice firm. I figured it out 3 days ago. My heart kicked up, but I kept it steady. I'm J.M. Harrow. We've met. She shook her head, pulling a photo from the envelope, a promo shot from Starlit Shores. Abigail stood center stage in a flowing blue dress, glowing under the lights. In the background, barely visible, was a younger me, directing from the shadows. I kept this because it was my first big gig as an assistant stage manager, Lila said. I was so green, so excited to work with real talent. You were different then, happier, more open. But it's you. I sank into my chair. The jig was up. Abigail left you for Elliot, didn't she? Lila's tone softened, almost pitying. I heard whispers about their affair during Shades of Us rehearsals, but I didn't know Abigail had been married before. I sighed. We kept it quiet, I admitted. Abigail figured it was better for her image to seem single, unattached. So you wrote this play to get back at her, didn't you? Cast them both, set the whole thing up like a trap. I studied Lila's face, trying to read her. What are you after, Lila? Her question cut through the chilly air like a blade. Did you kill Abigail? Outside, a hawk screeched over the quiet Lake Tahoe waters. I took a breath. I wrote a play. That's it. Lila reached into her envelope and pulled out grainy photos. Me at the gun shop in Tacoma, near the theater in Ballard, sitting right here in this cabin. Detective Hawkins hired a PI to dig into you, she said. These show you've been planning this for months. My mouth went dry, but I kept my cool. Those don't prove a crime. She spread the photos on my coffee table like a dealer flipping cards. Maybe not alone, but together? They scream obsession, planning. Why come to me? I asked. Why not run to the cops? Lila stared at the photos, silent for a long moment. Because I know what betrayal feels like, she finally said. 2 years ago, my fiancé left me for my best friend. For months, I dreamed of making them hurt. I didn't act on it, but if I'd been as clever as you, as patient, she trailed off. I might have done what you did. I leaned in. What do you want, Lila? Her eyes hardened. Elliot Kane's innocent. He's going to prison for your crime. I shook my head. Elliot's a self-obsessed actor who tore my marriage apart. If he's locked up, that's just the universe balancing out. Lila gathered the photos, her hands trembling. Abigail made her choices. She didn't deserve to die for them. Didn't she? I shot back. She stood, clutching the envelope. I'm going to Hawkins, she said. I'm telling him everything. With what? I called after her. Blurry photos and a hunch about who I am? That's not enough. She didn't answer, just crunched across the gravel to her car and drove off. That afternoon, Hawkins showed up again, alone, his vibe sharper, like a hunter closing in. Jacob Pierce, he said, settling into the same chair as before. That's your real name, isn't it? I shrugged. I go by Michael now, my middle name. He smirked, no warmth in it. When were you going to mention Abigail Pierce was your ex-wife? You didn't ask, I said. He let out a dry laugh. Lila Carter dropped off some interesting photos. Care to explain why you were buying guns and lurking around rehearsals? I kept my voice steady. Bought a gun for protection. This cabin's out in the middle of nowhere. As for the theater, I was checking on my play. Your play starring your ex-wife and her new guy, he said. Some coincidence. He leaned closer. Here's what I think. You found out about Abigail's affair, wrote Shades of Us as a twisted revenge plot, then made it real. Swapped the blanks for real bullets and let Elliot take the heat. I met his eyes, unflinching. Prove it. He pulled out an evidence bag with a note inside. Through the plastic, I read, use the alternate gun for tonight's show. J.M. Harrow. Handwriting matches yours, he said. My mind spun. I hadn't written it. Never saw that note, I said honestly. What's it supposed to mean? He raised an eyebrow. Analysis says it's your writing. Someone had forged my signature. But who? Even if I wrote it, I said, it's just about a prop change, not murder. Hawkins stood. You're sharp, Pierce. Sharper than Elliot Kane. Sharper than most crooks I've nabbed. But you cared too much. This was personal, and personal jobs always leave tracks. He left, and I sat in the dim cabin, puzzled over that note. Who had my handwriting? Who'd want to pin me tighter? Then it hit me as the stars blinked over the lake. Karen Walsh, Elliot's lawyer. She knew her client was screwed, so she'd cooked up fake evidence to muddy the case, pointing at the mysterious playwright to spark doubt. It was clever. Create a conspiracy, shift suspicion, give the jury something to chew on. But it also meant Hawkins was doubling down, and I was in his crosshairs. I poured a bourbon, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The guy looking back seemed older, colder than the one who'd started this months ago. Abigail was gone, Elliot was staring at a life sentence, and I was still free, for now. But freedom was starting to feel like a tightrope. In chess, they call it zugzwang. Every move makes things worse. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing. Elliot's trial kicked off on a dreary February morning, Seattle still sluggish from the post-holiday slump. I sat in the back of the courthouse, wearing a new jacket and wire-rimmed glasses, just another face in the crowd of reporters and rubberneckers. The prosecution painted Elliot as a washed-up actor, his career fading, his girlfriend slipping away, who saw murder as his last big scene. District Attorney Diane Brooks was brutal, laying out evidence like a chef plating a dish. Ladies and gentlemen, she said in her opening, this case is about a man who blurred the line between life and the stage. Elliot Kane thought he could rewrite his story, one where Abigail paid the ultimate price for his downfall. But at the defense table, he looked like a shell, his old Broadway swagger gone, replaced by a jittery guy who flinched at every noise. Karen Walsh, his lawyer, was tougher than I'd figured. The prosecution wants you to see this as a crime of passion, she told the jury, but the evidence points to something darker, a calculated setup to frame my client. She rolled out the gun shop footage, the mysterious note in the props cabinet, and Lila Carter's testimony about the shadowy playwright who'd shown up at rehearsals. Someone planned Abigail Pierce's death with cold precision, Walsh said. Someone who knew both victims inside out, who played on their flaws. My client's no killer. He's a victim of this scheme. When Lila took the stand, I held my breath. She glanced right at me in the courtroom gallery before speaking. I met J.M. Harrow backstage during rehearsals, she said. He said he was the playwright, but something felt off. How so? Walsh asked. Lila frowned. He stuck to the shadows and wouldn't show his face clearly. When he talked about the final scene, the gunshot, he sounded almost thrilled, like he was waiting for it. Did you later learn who he really was? Walsh pressed. Lila nodded. After digging through old photos, I realized J.M. Harrow is Jacob Pierce, Abigail's ex-husband. A buzz ran through the courtroom. Jurors perked up, eyes narrowing. The prosecution hit back hard. They brought in handwriting experts who swore the props cabinet note was legit. They rolled out psych reports claiming Elliot's headspace had been unraveling during the production. Even if Jacob Pierce wrote the play for revenge, Diane Brooks argued on cross-examination, that doesn't make him the killer. Elliot Kane pulled the trigger. His fingerprints were on the gun. He had motive, means, and opportunity. The trial dragged into March. Each day, Elliot seemed to shrink, crushed by the weight of public scorn. Even his own family acted like he was guilty. But Walsh kept pounding on reasonable doubt, bringing in ballistics experts who said the gun could have been tampered with after Elliot touched it, and timeline evidence hinting someone else had access to the props room. The real killer's in this courtroom, she said in her closing, her gaze sweeping the gallery, watching his plan play out, with my client cast as the fall guy. I felt eyes on me, but I kept my face blank. Suspicion wasn't proof. The jury took 3 days. When they came back, the foreman stood, looking uneasy. On the charge of murder in the second degree, he said, glancing at his notes, we find the defendant not guilty by reason of reasonable doubt. The courtroom exploded. Elliot slumped in his chair, sobbing with relief. Abigail's sister wailed from the family section. Reporters bolted for the exits, phones buzzing. I sat still, chewing on the verdict. Elliot was free, legally clean, but his life was in tatters. No theater would touch an actor acquitted of murdering his co-star. His career was dead, his reputation shredded, his future a blank slate of disgrace. Perfect. Outside, Elliot faced a swarm of cameras and mics. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't kill Abigail. I loved her. Someone took her life and tried to ruin mine. I hope the truth comes out someday. I knew it wouldn't. The case was done. Elliot was free but broken, and I was still a ghost. Detective Hawkins stood on the courthouse steps, watching Elliot's press conference, his face tight with frustration. A reporter asked if the police would keep digging. The case is closed, Hawkins said flatly. Kane was acquitted by a jury. That night, I drove back to my Lake Tahoe cabin and popped open a bottle of whiskey. Abigail was gone. Elliot's life was wrecked. My revenge was done. Outside, snow dusted the frozen lake, blanketing everything in quiet white. Justice sometimes took patience, sometimes a perfect plan, and sometimes it meant letting someone else pull the trigger. 3 months after Elliot's acquittal, I wandered through Seattle's Pike Place Market like a shadow of my old self. Neon signs glowed off the wet cobblestones, and tourists brushed past without a glance. The Cascade Theater sat dark, its marquee advertising a new run of Rent next month. No plaque marked where Abigail had fallen. Seattle's theater scene bounced back fast from the tragedy. I snagged a ticket to a matinee of Macbeth at the Civic Theater, sitting in the same section where Abigail and I had caught our first show together 14 years ago. During intermission, I overheard 2 critics chatting about the industry moving on from that awful Kane mess. Rough deal, one said, but I hear Elliot's trying to claw his way back in small-town theaters. Who'd hire him? The other scoffed. Guy's a walking curse. They weren't wrong. I'd tracked Elliot's downfall on theater blogs and social media. The swaggering star was now a shadow, taking bit parts in community shows and dinner theaters, playing to near-empty rooms. He'd lost weight, picked up a drinking habit, and looked 20 years older in half a year. Revenge doesn't get sweeter than watching your enemy live through their ruin. That night, back at my Lake Tahoe cabin, I found an envelope on the porch. No return address, just my name in neat handwriting. Inside was a single photo. Abigail in her dressing room on Shades of Us's opening night, putting on lipstick in front of a mirror. She looked alive, vibrant, clueless. She had hours left. A note was clipped to it. Some ghosts don't stay gone. L.K. Lila Carter. She was still digging, still trying to prove what she couldn't in court. I tossed the photo into the fireplace, watching the flames eat away her smile until it was ash. The next morning, a news alert made me grin. Elliot Kane had been picked up for drunk driving in Spokane, where he'd been doing Othello for a crowd of 10. His mugshot showed a wrecked man, hollow eyes, messy hair, the look of someone who'd lost it all and knew it. The article said he'd been alone, driving to a cheap motel after the show. No friends, no one to lean on, no future worth chasing. I printed it out and stuck it in my scrapbook, the final page of a story 2 years in the making. But that afternoon, Detective Carl Hawkins called. Pierce, we need to talk. My gut tightened. The Kane case is closed, I said. Not about Kane, he replied. About you. We met at a diner near Lake Tahoe, the same spot where I'd read about Elliot's arrest. Hawkins looked worn, like the case had carved lines into his face. Lila Carter killed herself last week, he said, no preamble. The words hit like a punch. What? Overdose, pills in her apartment, he said. Left a note saying she couldn't live with what she knew, but couldn't prove. My head spun. Lila's photo, her relentless digging, her guilt over Elliot's acquittal, it had broken her. Hawkins slid an envelope across the table. She left this for you. Inside was a single page in Lila's handwriting. You got your revenge, but at what price? Abigail's dead. Elliot's ruined. Now I'm gone. How many lives was your justice worth? The real tragedy isn't what happened on that stage. It's what you've become. I folded the note, tucking it into my pocket. She was a good kid, Hawkins said. Smart, loved the theater. Your revenge took her out just as much as it did Abigail. I didn't kill anyone, I said. He shook his head. Maybe not in court, but you set this in motion. You wrote a tragedy that burned through 4 lives. Abigail's, Elliot's, Lila's, and yours. My life's fine, I shot back. He gave a bitter laugh. Is it? You're holed up in a cabin, hiding under a fake name. No friends, no family, no real self. That ain't living, Pierce. That's just breathing. He stood, then paused. One more thing. Elliot Kane died yesterday. My blood froze. How? Overdose, intentional, Hawkins said. His note said he couldn't live with the world thinking he was a murderer. He walked out, leaving me alone in the booth, the weight of 4 deaths sinking in. That night I stood on the dock behind my cabin, staring at the dark lake. The water was still, reflecting stars like broken glass. Abigail was dead, Elliot was dead, Lila was dead, and I was alive, but empty, a ghost in my own skin. I'd gotten my revenge, punished the wife who betrayed me and the man who took her. But it tasted like dust, like sinking slowly underwater. Shades of us was done, and everyone who'd stepped into its reflection was gone, me included. I pulled Lila's note out and read it again by moonlight. The real tragedy isn't what happened on that stage, it's what you've become. She was right. I'd won, but I'd lost myself. The lake lapped at the dock, and a hawk cried somewhere far off, its call sharp and lonely, like something fading away. I tucked the note back in my pocket, went inside, poured a bourbon, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. Outside, snow started falling, draping the world in quiet white.